Then when it came to 100, I was like, okay, how do I fractionalize, or how do I visualize this? Oh, well, there's 50 stars on an American flag. I'm just going to punch. Imagine that there's two American flags right next to them. Just punch out the stars, put them together, change the stars to the blue dots, and now we're in business. Then the 1,000, I was like, that's just going to be like a white space with like all the dots in the world. And I just go, yeah, there's 1,000 in there. I'm sure, maybe.
If you would like to support the efforts and research we are doing here on this podcast, please go to podcast.discoveringyourmind.com and become a monthly supporter. We greatly appreciate your support. Thank you. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. If you have just discovered that you or someone you love has aphantasia, or if you're just fascinated by the subject in general and love learning more about it, you are in the right place. The Discovering Your Mind podcast delves into all aspects of the mind's eye, including aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and everything in between. Welcome to the Discovering Your Mind podcast, brought to you by shanesbraindomain.com. I am your host, Shane Williams, also known as Shane's Brain, and today we're talking with the one and only Brett Kelley, who I just met, and we're excited to have on the show. How you doing there, Brett?
Hey, not too bad. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you having me on. Looking forward to having some fun conversations.
All right, me too. Let's start out with just letting us know what you do for a living.
Sure. I work a blue-collar office clerk job by day, but by night I'm also a freelance creative or artist. I do a lot of illustration. I design my own products and release as such. Enamel pins, art books. I also have done a lot of commissions. I've done work for museums and galleries all across the United States. Have done work that's appeared on television and like on other different shows on Netflix and whatnot. I've had some work show up in publications here and there. I've definitely lived a normal life to sustain my weird life, basically, in a long story short.
Right.
But, yeah.
I can relate to that for sure.
I count myself lucky in that over the last 15 years or so, I've developed a bit of a following, a very niche market of a couple hundred people that really like my work. So it affords me the ability to make stuff that I wouldn't be able to otherwise, and then, break even or make enough to then fund the next project. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from. I do take commissions on occasion, but I decided to spoil myself in the year of 2024 and wanted to spend a lot of time working on a bunch of personal projects on my back burner. But then when 2025 hits, I'll be revving up the old commission list again. So looking forward to that.
Okay, very cool. What about anything else? Any other stuff you like to do for fun or other things you're interested in?
Sure. Yeah. Big comic book fan. I was previously a recurring co-host on a long-running podcast that had just retired in 2022 called Opinions May Vary. 450 episodes across 10 years. Super fun. Like some of my best friends that I've made. Like I used to be a stunt performer for local theme parks in New England and whatnot. And that's where I met a lot of my really close friends and became a makeup artist. So big fan of film and acting and voice acting, which I currently do on one of my friends' audio drama podcasts called the Starwell Foundation, and martial arts and a lot of the old stunt work type of stuff. Although I've kind of, as I've gotten older, my body is kind of retired for me, where they're like, you can't go getting hit by cars anymore. So I'm like, oh, all right, you make a compelling argument. I guess I'll just watch stuff and write things instead. So, but yeah, I'm a big music fan too. So I do a lot of artwork for musicians and local acts as well, and big supporter of local music and all that. I'm from Western Massachusetts, where a lot of like heavy metal bands like Killswitch Engage got their start. I'm a big fan of the community that's out there too. So yeah, and there's a couple other things, but that's just off the top of my head, not to be too boring with it.
No, that's really cool. You've dabbled in a lot of really cool things. So I think that'll be interesting as we talk about how your mind works, how it plays into all those things that you've done.
Sure. Yep. I hope so.
In this episode, we will be referring to what we call the Apple Graph. If you would like to view the Apple Graph to play along and better understand what we're talking about, You can find it on shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia and Beyond section. If you are unable to view the apple graph for whatever reason, it is a graph divided into 6 sections. In the number 6 section, there is a very detailed image of a red apple. In the number 5 section, it is the same image but with less detail. Number 4 is still in color but has less detail and more basic shapes instead of detailed hues and gradients. Number 3 is the less detailed apple but in gray tones without the color. Number 2 is a simple outline of the apple. And number 1 is blank, indicating no visualization whatsoever. This is called aphantasia. Visualize a red apple in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll share my screen with you here real quick. So which one of those best represents what you saw in your mind's eye?
I would probably say between and I give an honest answer, between 5 and 6. Yeah, like not it's not like 4K, but it's pretty close. Like it's like if it were a painting, I'd want to give it a couple more hours before it's finished. But it's like 80% of the way there.
Okay. Very cool. So you said you've heard of aphantasia before. Do you want to just tell us real quick about how you heard about it and what you know about it?
Sure. Seeing one of your posts about aphantasia actually kind of knocked something loose in my head, where just a couple years ago, that very graph that you had sent me, that I had seen a couple permutations in meme form online, and I didn't even realize what I was engaging with was considered aphantasia. I just thought that was I was compelled by the image because I just thought it was a really interesting way of like, it identified something that I didn't know was a thing, where I was like, oh, I felt that it was a great example of seeing how different people's brains work. So I was the person that sent it out to a lot of people being like, what do you see? Like, what, like, which ones are you? Are you 0 or 5 or 6, or which one are you? So I kind of engaged with it almost as kind of like a social experiment before I really realized that the proper terminology of it was. And then when you had posted about it, I researched it. I popped it into my Google search, and that very image popped up first. And like, I was like, oh, that's what this is. That's awesome. So yeah. So like my experience with it directly has just kind of been sharing it with amongst a couple of my friend groups and family members. And then seeing that, like, I have a couple family members that they don't see anything, that they like one in which not to throw any of my lovely family members under the bus, but me and a couple people were like, oh yeah, you see 5 or 6? Like, oh, I see 5 or 6, and then I was like, oh, what do you see? And they were like, oh, well, you're just bragging. I'm like, why? What do you see? Like, I see 0. And I go, oh, okay. Like in my joy and fascination, if not, or a celebration of how different people's brains are, I didn't realize that even approaching that in that way could invoke negative feelings. I just thought it was just a really interesting, positive thing. So yeah, that was definitely my first, I would say that was like my first concrete, and that was before I even knew that the word existed. So, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Just so you know a little bit of my background, I discovered that I had aphantasia like 25 years ago when I was in college. And back then it didn't have a name. Nobody was talking about it, but it intrigued me like crazy. So I started, like you, just asking everybody about it. And so I did that over the years. And then in 2015, Adam Zeman studied it and gave it the name aphantasia. And since then, a lot more people know about it. A lot more people have been talking about it.
Yeah.
But what I did is over the span of the last several years, I developed a series of questions that I like to just ask people and discover all these differences that each of us are experiencing in our minds. Because the tendency is, especially before you learn about it, you just kind of think everybody is like you. Yeah. And nothing could be further from the truth. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to ask you these questions and figure out where you're at with a lot of these things and figure out how your mind works.
Sure. No, happy to do so. But yeah, hopefully I can find out some stuff about how my brain works too. I would always love some more answers to that.
All right. The first thing I'd like you to do is visualize a chicken in your mind. Is it like looking at a picture or more of just a thought or something else?
The first impression that I got in my mind was, I would almost say it was almost like an animation, like a cartoon, if you will, where it necessarily wasn't a specific like type of chicken, but then my brain decided to cycle through all the different type of visual aesthetics, if you will, where it was like the first thing that popped into my head was just like, oh, a nice illustration of a chicken, and it's in movement, it's nice bright green background, a lot of bold, bright colors, and then my brain immediately switched over to the Legend of Zelda chicken from Ocarina of Time, the one that you can ride, and if you hit it, too many of them come at you. So yeah, like my brain tends to cycle through a lot of different iterations before it settles on one thing. And generally, the image is not static; it is either in motion or in flux, or at least with this example.
Can you describe a little bit more what it looks like when you're cycling through these different things? Is it kind of like a split screen, or how does it manifest?
I mean, I'm just closing my eyes just so that way I can concentrate on the exercise. But when I, generally speaking, even with my eyes open, I can visualize like weird odd details, like the first 4 or 5 different iterations of what I'm thinking of when it comes to a chicken, they're always facing left for some reason. In what, like, it's almost kind of like, you know, the old timey motion pictures where you have like, or like, you know, like the old timey viewfinders where you can like, you know, you have like the red viewfinder and then you push the orange slat down and then another picture comes down. You're like, oh, the Grand Canyon. My brain kind of cycles through images like that to a degree, sometimes, depending, or at least in this instance. So before it was like, oh, it's the cartoon one. Oh, it's the Legend of Zelda one. Oh, that's a rooster that's way more brightly colored and a little bit more detailed and not quite white and red classic chicken. And then, oh, this one's from, you know, this one's facing left. Oh, and this one's facing forward for some reason. And this one's on a farm. So like my brain will immediately kind of, it's almost like not even an overcompensation, but it's kind of an odd thing where even when thinking of the apple, not to go too far off the beaten path, but it's like my brain kind of instantly reacts with a question, like being like, oh, well, what kind of chicken? Like, where is it? It's going to be on a farm, or is it going to be in the woods? Or, you know, it's a lot. It cycles through a lot of different versions. But yeah, but that's kind of like how, if I can break down as detailed as possible what my brain was going through in that moment, then that's probably where I'm at. And then after everything settles, I can kind of hone in on an image and then kind of pluck that back a little bit, hit the rewind button, and then stay on that for a little bit longer.
Okay. Thanks for that detail. That is interesting. So I was going to ask if you had any control over what images appear. Is it more like you're just kind of observing what's happening? Or you mentioned you asked those questions. Well, what is it going to be? And then your mind just gives you some options. Is that accurate?
Yeah. It happened back with the apple. When the first time I was ever asked that question with an apple, I kind of like someone was like, oh, what do you think of when you envision an apple? And my brain just went totally granular. It was like, what kind of apple? Like, is it a red apple? Is it a green apple? Is it an apple on a table in a kitchen? Is it an apple just on a table outside? Is it daytime? Is it nighttime? Is the apple whole? Is it cut? Is it rotten? Like my brain just went through all of those different things.
That's
and
cool.
then as like those suggestions come in, it's almost like whose line is it anyway? Like Scenes from a Hat, where it's just like those things just get plucked out of the ether, and then my brain just kind of scrambles to piece those things together, and then it will eventually settle on one. But sometimes it's like I have to kick my brain to get it started, if you will, like in that regard.
The image of the chickens are they 2D or 3D?
Ooh, that's a great question. They can vary. For me, in terms of, I can see it in space. I can definitely view it from like as if it's a static image, or it's like a movie reel, if you will. I can definitely envision it in both. And then while cycling through those two, like all those different things, like I'd said, like the first image when you asked what the chicken was, I said it was very animated, almost like a cartoon, very bright, bold colors. Almost like something you find in a child book, where it's like you have the bright white and then you have like the dark gray undershadow and very bright green grass, but it's very nebulous. But then that switched over to, because like, oh, it's graphic, but it's also very simplistic, kind of like, you know, a 64-bit, like an N64, which then brought me to Legend of Zelda, and which, because it's Legend of Zelda, it's famously three-dimensional game. I see it in three dimensions where, like, you know, the chicken, like you're walking around it or it's turning. I can definitely view it in those different capacities. But yeah, so I can definitely cycle through the different versions. I would say, yeah.
Okay.
Like I can move between two, second and third dimension.
Okay.
And actually, I was thinking, like, can I think about being a chicken in the first person? So yes, I can. You didn't ask me that, and I don't know why I'm bringing it up, but that's now that I'm thinking, I can think of being a chicken, like really close to the ground, looking around, just not knowing what's going on.
Can you make the chicken fly?
Can I make the chicken fly? Can I envision the chicken flying? Yes.
In what way? Because chickens don't really fly very well, but can you make it? Can you make it fly? Can you give it the gift of flight?
Yes. Once again, funny enough, and I can go in sequential order here. The first thing that popped into my head was, like, once again, Legend of Zelda rules, where like you can use the chicken to glide, so it hops up. You hop up with the chicken, and then the chicken slowly descends slowly. And then I was like, well, what if the chicken took off like an airplane? So it's the same motion of the chicken, arms outstretched, but instead of descending, it's now ascending into the sky like a JetBlue airliner. And then the third one was then being like, oh no, the chicken actually functions like flapping its wings, but then it flies up. And even then, it doesn't look natural when it happens. It's almost like I'm envisioning the chicken, its wings are morphing into like that of an eagle, or like, a bigger creature where the wings would actually propel it. Yeah.
Oh, wow. What about this one? Can you put a vest and a tie on the chicken?
Yes. It looks very dapper. First time, my brain immediately went Christmas colors, a deep green and a deep green vest, deep red tie. And then even for my own amusement, like you have like the nice kind of like, when like an old timey Christmas movie gets like the real like shine, and you have like the little like golden lining, like swirls on the fabric. Yeah. That's on there.
Oh, wow. Is the image more clear with your eyes closed or your eyes open?
I can focus on it better with my eyes closed 100%. Like I never even was cognizant of me visualizing with my eyes open and closed. But yeah, I can do it with my eyes open and closed. But I will say that my eyes closed, I can derive a lot more detail and fully immerse myself in it better. When my eyes are open, like I can have those images, but they don't stay very long. Like as a matter of fact, like I can hold on to it, but my brain will let go of it really quick too. So it's not like, the time that we've been talking, whenever I mention it, it'll last for maybe, like a ripple in a pond, if you will. Like it'll stay and it'll shimmer for a little bit, and then it'll dissipate, and then I'll have to either refresh my memory or kind of really work to pull it back.
Would you say that the chicken's in your mind, or is it projected out in front of you?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. I would definitely say up until this point, the chicken is absolutely in my head. But now thinking about it, like I can visualize, like I could theoretically visualize that there is a chicken in front of me, but that would be like to go back to like the 0 to 6 for like the apple. For me to do that, that's way lower. Like that's not like a 5 or 6. That's like maybe a 1 or a 2, maybe 3 if I'm really like concentrating on that.
Is the image solid or transparent?
It is solid. It's almost like I'm immersed, like almost like a VR, like you get hooked up into a VR game, and like it's not there, but you can still interact with it, and that kind of has that nebulous, kind of weird, uncanny feeling. I get a touch of that. Yeah.
If the chicken made a sound, could you hear it in your mind?
Yeah. Although, not that I can't say that it's original. It's like the stock. And it's a rooster. It's not a chicken. So like, but you can hear like the stock noise that you'd hear about a rooster crowing. That was like the first thing that popped into my head. But then also I can hear the background of like an actual chicken. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh man, this is another one. But even thinking about a chicken noise, now my brain's going to like, where else have I heard a man-made chicken noise? And I'm like, oh, Robin Williams and Hook. Like.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. All right, we're done with the chicken. Now I would like you to visualize a Glaucus atlanticus.
Glaucus atlanticus.
I
think I'm sensing the nature of this exercise, because I can't confidently say I know what a Glaucus atlanticus is.
Okay, so did you visualize anything?
Yeah, my brain goes to a couple different things. The first thing, because we were just talking about we were just talking about a bird, so my brain was like, oh, maybe it is like, an Atlantic Ocean bird. But then Glaucus, I was like, oh, well, maybe my brain goes, oh, so it's a pistol. It's a pistol it's a pistol from the ocean. So all of a sudden I'm thinking of a Glock with wings that are attached to it flying over the Atlantic. But even then, my brain cycled through a bunch of different things. At first, it was like, what could a Glaucus atlanticus be if it's a bird? Where my brain was like, oh, maybe it's like a dark blue because I'm thinking of the ocean, and it's a bigger avian creature that maybe it's like a seagull or something like that, like it has its wings locked, like because it glides maybe. But my brain definitely still stuck in the bird category for a little bit before going silly with the literal translation and the pun.
Okay, very cool description. Next, I would like you to visualize any room.
Any room? You got it.
Can you zoom outside the room to visualize the entire exterior of the building?
Yes.
What about the entire neighborhood?
Yep.
And what about the entire city?
Yes.
Okay. Can you describe what that was like?
Yes. So for this one, any room, the first room that popped into my head was a martial arts studio, like a training room. That the room itself is in a new place since it moved since I was in high school. So but it's the room that I would train in if I still went to my old martial arts training school. The space itself is big blue mat. On the left hand side, there is a logo. It's actually the very first commissioned image that I'd ever taken. I was 15 years old. I think I was paid $200 for it. I designed the logo of the studio. It was 3 teardrops, and the 3 teardrops had 3 different things in them, and that is on the left side of the wall if you're looking out at it. Outside of the mall, I can see from a bird's eye view the mall itself. It's a 1 floor. It's about the size of a couple football fields. There's a movie theater there. It's surrounded by parking lot on each side, and then further out, my brain is now looking at it, like switches between it being a map of Enfield, Connecticut, which is in northern Connecticut, and then also just looking at it as if it was like an overhead satellite that you see with like Google Maps or something like that. When I zoomed out, my brain immediately focused on the details, the new details, the older section that was set up. Instead of it being an inset and an inset, it's almost as if my brain was going in through 3 different scene changes in a film, if that makes sense, where it's like, oh, the room, like I can still see the studio and I know that all those details are still there, but because I moved into a new environment in my mind, my brain is more hyper focused on the new introductory surroundings. The old stuff, once again, that's kind of rippling away in the pool, if you will. Then when I branch out, because I'm thinking of the mall itself, I'm just thinking of the building. I'm not even thinking of the room anymore. That's in the my brain already knows that the room is there. I'm focusing on the new, creating the new, basically, and then also continuing with the city.
Okay. So you mentioned designing logos, and I do that as well.
Awesome.
When you design a logo, do you design it in your mind first?
It depends. I want to say it's a bit of yes and no. Like I do a little column A, column B, because for me, I still really like doing concept sketches and loose sketching. And and I'm still at the level, like I'm not a master of any craft by any stretch of the imagination. I will forever be a student. However, one of the things that I like doing is that I do like having the idea and conceptualizing it in my head. But I've also, in my process of developing things, I really do like, I'll have an idea in my head and I'll try and recreate it on paper. But really, like, I still try and create, like, there is still like a conceptual break between what I'm seeing in my head and what I get down on paper, no matter what. I still do rely visually on coming up with like the ideas and seeing it, but I still find joy in the process of, sculpting on paper, like getting the forms down and doing an approximation of the idea, but then letting the idea exist organically in real time, basically. So I kind of like, it all starts up here, obviously, but then I really try and leave it out on the paper and figure out what that's going on, because otherwise, then I'm just going to be tearing away paper. I'm just going to be like grinding my teeth down and, bashing my head against the wall just because it won't look exactly the way I think it will. Because once again, I can think of the idea, but then it still does like the shelf life. I can't hold it up like a painting in a gallery and look at it for very, very long. I mean, I can refresh it, but even in the refreshing, it can probably change here and there.
Okay, that's cool. I appreciate that description. That's pretty cool.
No, definitely.
Now I would like you to visualize 3 blue dots.
Okay.
Now visualize 9 blue dots.
Sure.
Now visualize 100 blue dots.
Okay.
Now visualize 1,000 blue dots.
Okay.
Okay. Were you able to do that?
You had me up until 100. 1,000 got a little tricky. 1,000 basically just became more of like I can see a lot of dots, and I just have to assume that there are 1,000 of them. 100, so like 3 blue dots, my brain immediately went to, oh yeah, three dots, like somebody's typing in a chat message. Instead of them being gray, I'll just make them blue, and instead of them flickering, they're just going to be there full. 9 blue dots, my brain immediately went to, I've been doing a lot of Duolingo lately, and they currently opened up a math course, so I'm like, oh, I'm horrible at math, but I can draw the numbers real cool. So I've been really trying to get better at math. So a lot of the things that they'll do for fractions, that they will do the visuals of 3 by 3 and a 9 if you're to visualize 9 for a fraction. So my brain immediately went to there, and theirs are green, so I just shifted those to blue. Then when it came to 100, I was like, okay, how do I fractionalize, or how do I visualize this? Oh, well, there's 50 stars on an American flag. I'm just going to imagine that there's 2 American flags right next to them, just punch out the stars, put them together, change the stars to the blue dots, and now we're in business. Then the 1,000, I was like, that's just going to be like a white space with like all the dots in the world. And I just go, yeah, there's 1,000 in there. I'm sure, maybe.
That is so cool how your brain solved the problems like that. The American flag stars. That's a great detail there.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow.
Hey, fill the world with good vibes and positivity with our new Soul Relief brand t-shirts. Check it out at shanesbraindomain.com.
This is kind of a new thing I'm trying to explore, but I've noticed that the words I use kind of make a difference to different people. So listen to the following 4 phrases. Picture it, imagine it, visualize it, and think of it.
Okay.
Are all 4 of those phrases interchangeable? Do they all mean the same thing to you? And if not, can you explain?
Picture it, visualize it, imagine it, and think it.
Right.
My first gut reaction was they're all different interpretations of the same thing. But my brain goes, well, are they? Like, what can I do to make those 4 interpretations different? And so picture it, I was like, oh, imagine it as if it's a picture hanging on a wall, or it's a picture that I'm working on. Visualize it as like, oh, visualize it like you're watching it on television. Imagine it is almost like, oh, imagine it as if like put it in the thought bubble above your head. You know, if you're Garfield thinking about lasagna on a Monday or something. Then think it is very much like, oh, the idea is in your head. Like, or you're focusing on it, you're meditating on it, if you will. So, I mean, once again, I mean, those can all be different interpretations. Those are all 4 different ways of interpreting kind of the same thing of visualization. But yeah, like that's kind of like where my brain cemented down into. So, yeah, my brain was like, yeah, they're all the same. Well, wait a minute. I can choose I can choose for them to all be the same, but I can also choose for all 4 of them to be different. Now, how do I do that? So that's where I got from there.
Okay. So, yeah, that's very interesting. So let me ask you this. When I asked you about the chicken,
yes,
I said visualize a chicken. Mm-hmm. If I had said picture a chicken, or imagine a chicken, or think of a chicken, would that have changed anything?
I think if you'd asked me to picture a chicken, it would have been a static image. And I think that's just because of the years of being like, oh, look at this picture I made. I took a picture of you. Just a natural human association of picture now being associated with, you know, you take a thing and it's a moment captured in time.
All right, cool. So when you quote unquote think about something, does it primarily happen in images or sounds, or a mixture of both, or something else?
I would say when I'm thinking about something, it definitely depends on, for me, it depends on what I'm thinking about. Because I definitely have a way of, like I can recall memories pretty vividly, for better or for worse. So, and those memories, because they both involve visuals and audio, I can do that. Having fun thinking of something, like I might, it depends on what I'm thinking about, really. Because if I'm thinking about a concert, or if I'm thinking about a band that I like, or if I'm stuck somewhere and I don't have access to music, I'll just be like, all right, I'm just going to listen to Limp Bizkit's Break Stuff in my head because I have that song memorized and I can just play it. It's a very, very random example, an embarrassing one at that sometimes, depending on what your opinion of Limp Bizkit is. But, but then also like I can definitely visualize, like lately, honestly, when I'm thinking about different projects that I'm working on or different ideas or different stuff. Like right now, I've been breaking this idea of like starting my own brand market or just a brand like for a product, but like a brand that would eventually become like an art gallery and then maybe like a publication down the line, something of that nature. And when I think about those types of things, those are silent because those are all just visualizing like what would the gallery look like what would the logo look like what would the day-to-day be, because that doesn't necessarily involve a lot of audio. It is pretty quiet.
Does effort play a role in how well you can visualize something?
I think it's situational for sure. I would say effort. And you know what, like are you ever like improvisation, like improv comedy or anything like that? Like do you have any experience with doing that type of stuff or just watching it, or you're a fan? Or
yeah, I've never done it. I've done stand-up comedy.
Nice.
I've never done improv, but I'm a fan of both.
Awesome. The only reason I ask is because like when I was young, when I was like middle school, high school, I did a lot of improv, and because of that, I'm like, oh, like can I come up with things and not exude as much effort because I've spent years and years doing improv where I'm used to just plucking things, like just coming up with things on the spot. Like can I come up with things without effort because I've just conditioned myself over years? Or is it just something that naturally happens? I don't know if I could actually answer that question, because I could say that, yeah, I can come up with like whatever on the spot, but it's also because it's like, oh yeah, of course I can run. Yes, of course I can run. I've been jogging 5 miles for the last 10 years every day. It's kind of one of those things. So like, I don't know if I can discern whether or not it's something I can do just because it's a muscle that I've worked out and done because I did that and was able to connect the dots on that, or if it's just something that I can do. But there are definitely things that I definitely need effort to focus on for a longer amount of time, like writing a letter, because I'll get lost in the sauce, as you can tell. Like I said, I'm a human run-on sentence. Like, if I'm writing something, or even when I'm talking, as evidenced by this entire interview, I can go down a lot of rabbit holes, but then I got to yank myself back up to the point, get myself out of the ditch that I just drove myself into. So yeah, so that takes effort to be concise with how I think, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. In general, when you close your eyes, what do you see?
Ooh, good question. That actually depends on my mood. I think if I'm just hanging out, I might close my eyes. My brain might drift towards, an idea that I have, or just right now I've been very busy. So my brain, whenever I'm closing my eyes, or if I have some moments, all I'm doing is thinking about the next thing, or worrying or stressing out about the next thing. And my brain comes up with like the potential solutions to those things. And this is where I like to point out where imagination can sometimes be not so fun. Because, like I said, we're going back to even like the vividness, or thinking of like recalling memories. My brain got into the real bad habit for a while of only recalling really bad memories and stewing in regrets, or like, oh, remember that mistake I made? Oh man, that was embarrassing. Oh man, I really wish that person didn't hate me anymore, or I wish my brain will go into those places. And because I remember everything that was said, and I can recall all the details, and my brain will recycle through it. My brain will be like, well, how do we fix this problem that that happened forever ago?
Is there always something visual going on in your mind? Does your visualization ever turn off?
Yes. The hardest thing for me to do is to fall asleep. But it's also like because my brain will run like a motor. Before, when I was younger, I just didn't really utilize a lot of tools accessible to me. And I went to a big party school. So like in order for me to, for a while, there was a very short-lived period of time where I was like, oh, drinking alcohol, I can just go to sleep, and then I don't have to and my brain, like all the cartoons in my head aren't there to keep me awake. I don't do that anymore, luckily. But yeah, there was a while where I was like, for a while, there was like a very short-lived belief in my brain where I was like, alcohol is good. I know alcohol is bad for you, but alcohol for me was helpful in the fact that it helped me chill out. It helped my brain just kind of calm down a little bit. And then it just made me fall asleep easier. even though technically it's not sleep, if we want to be, we want to speak of this as from a health perspective. The sleep that I was getting was not the highest quality level of sleep I was getting if I was drinking to make me fall asleep. But at that time, knowing what I didn't know now, it's very easy to criticize myself from back in the day. But so I would say that sometimes it's hard to turn off my brain. Yeah.
Can you think of nothing if you want to?
It requires effort to think of nothing. And I actually I was developing this when I was going to martial arts once again through meditation. And my interpretation of nothing generally is thinking of a lake, like a mountainside lake, as if you're looking over a lake, which I know already violates the idea of thinking of nothing. But my version of nothing is a lake, clean, no ripples on it, and then living in that moment and that being your nothing.
Okay.
Yeah, I would love to think of nothing. I do. I wish that, because man, I feel like that would be amazing.
Yeah, that's one of the things I can do that a lot of highly visual people get jealous of. Yeah, I can do that.
Well, and actually, what's fascinating is that even though aphantasia is still technically it's considered such a new, it's 15, 20 years, as a recognized.
2015.
Okay, 2015 okay, gotcha. Great. But so the fact that it's, not even 10 years old, that it's been identified as an actual condition is being studied. It's kind of interesting because of the fact that, because I'm it's very clear that aphantasia, from my humble opinion, I believe that it's definitely way more of a thing, because that concept of being able to just not think of something has been a trope in modern comedy for as long as sitcoms have existed. You know what I mean?
Right.
Homer Simpson, Peter Griffin, all the classic archetypes of a dad, where you're just how can he just be there? And you zoom in Homer's face, and it's just nothing, and you just hear the seagulls cawing, and you're it's clearly not this niche thing. It just hasn't been recognized by the broader community as a thing. You know what I mean?
Right. Does your ability to visualize vary depending on circumstances, details, and events?
Yes. The more stressed out I am, the less creative I am, the less my brain focuses on things that are productive. It tends to hyper focus on the thing that's stressful, which is a lot like accidentally driving your car off the bridge because you didn't want to drive your car off the bridge. So what you focused on was the side of the bridge. And your brain just immediately accidentally just gravitated towards the side of the bridge because it was the thing you were focusing on instead of focusing on getting over the bridge.
Do you tend to visualize things you've already seen before, or do you tend to create new and unique images in your mind?
Both. And actually, the prime example being that when you told me to visualize a room, very open-ended, my brain immediately went to a room that I'm familiar with, one that I had visited recently. So I can do that for sure. And that also helps with memories and stuff like that. I can remember I can remember a fight I used to have with amongst my family in the kitchen in my house when I was 11 years old. I remember what the kitchen looked like. I remember who was where and what was being said and how loud it was, that type of thing. But I can also, depending on what genre that my brain wants to think in, I can either come up with dialogue and conversations that have never happened, and that'll be like an SNL skit. My brain does that, but then my brain also likes to just come up with different things in different genres. Or I'm okay, well, let me think of solar punk. What is a solar? Give me a solar punk story. Okay, what does a solar punk rover look like on the surface of Mars? What would that look like? And just have it's going to look like a Humvee, but all the panels are solar panels, basically, but the solar panels look like rainbow. So and they're all conjoined, and it doesn't look mechanical. It looks way more smooth. And then that way it looks nice and fancy, kind of like a Eon Flux cartoon or something. So so I bounce back between all those things, depending on my mood, depending on how I feel.
Can you visualize to the extent that it completely takes you out of your reality?
Not so much as I've gotten older. When I was younger, definitely. When I was younger, I definitely had moments where, I suppose for lack of a better comparison, you could call it a Calvin and Hobbes moment, where your imagination, your imagination as a 6-7 years old, you're just very hyperactive and you're fighting the ninjas that have come out of the backyard, and you have a stick that's the coolest sword you've ever seen, and you're having that amazing last third act fight scene in your backyard, and then you get yelled at because it's 8 o'clock and you totally lost track of time. Like I definitely have those moments. I don't have those as many as I'm growing up. The closest thing that I have to those moments now at 40 years old are I'll have very vivid dreams that can either be very emotional or will make me feel like I'm actually in the moment of what's going on. Unfortunately, a lot of the times that those happens, it's nightmares, which is not great. Like those are not the times you want to be really present is in a nightmare, especially when you have like really like gnarly ones like I've had in the past. And I used to have really vivid, horrible nightmares growing up as a child where like, I could go 2-3 days at 5-6 years old without sleep because I just would not want to go to sleep.
All right. That's very interesting. All right. So when it comes to mind visualization, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much does it resemble reality? How much is it like actual seeing?
I can toggle between those different interpretations. It's almost kind of like like the Rick and Morty's like alternate dimension gun, where like you just can portal through different realities, and then they kind of like go through different interpretations of what reality is in that given moment. So I guess like so my brain can do that and does do that on occasion because it'll just come up with like a bunch of different things. But its relation to reality can vary. If I want to make it if I intentionally visualize something for it to be rooted in reality, I can probably get between 7 or 8. With effort, depending on what it is, I could probably think 9 or 10. And once again, because it depends. If it's recalling a memory, I can get to 9 to 10. But if it's something that I'm creating, it's definitely like a 7 or 8 range, depending. Like making something that doesn't exist, but trying to fit it into the real world, I cannot get there like a 1-to-1 copy. For memories, a little bit, yeah.
So I'd like you to imagine an old woman that you have never seen before wearing a yellow dress.
Okay.
How much does she resemble a real person?
I would say the base model, if you will, to talk in like production terms, the first thing that popped into my mind definitely started out as resembling a person, like a person that exists. In this particular case, the first thing was my late grandmother in a yellow dress, for sure. But then as you were progressing to explain a person that never existed before, so I was like, oh, well, let me change that person up. And then I phased through a little bit of a cartoon face where it's almost like, like the old Looney Tune cartoon where, where Bugs Bunny is like erasing and drawing on Daffy and Daffy's losing his mind. Had a little bit of that going on where all of a sudden like, okay, it's my late grandmother, but now like hair's sheet white in curls down lower than her hair normally is. Then my brain went to a little more of a cartoony. And then I started reinterpreting her as more of like plucking different details that I know of, like, oh, the big sun visors, and her posture's a little bit more hunched over because I'm making her a little bit older, giving her a walker. Yellow dress, yellow sundress that doesn't covers a lot, goes down to the ankles. Orange flowers spotted across it. Yeah.
Okay, that's very cool. So, can you see the wrinkles in her skin or individual strands of hair?
I can't. So here's the weird thing. My brain initially settled when you had settled it. Like I said, it was much more cartoony and graphic. As you had described it, my brain immediately started focusing in on those details and then putting them there. So it's almost my brain's trying to recalibrate and readjust to the parameters of what the question is. So like, right. And the wrinkles that immediately came to mind were, the classic like smile wrinkles from the nose to the mouth. The strands of hair not going outward so much, but kind of unfurling out while framing the face, if you will. So not necessarily frazzled, but more like it's a humid day and the hair is just kind of expanding a bit. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Could you match the yellow color of the dress to a paint swatch at Home Depot next week?
Yes. 100%.
Really?
Yeah. The yellow that I had, it's more of like a light cadmium yellow. So it's not like it's not obnoxiously bright, but it's also not like dark, like a yellow ochre or anything. But yeah, like I was thinking more of like a light cadmium hue, like, or a light medium, something with a little bit more weight to it, not quite as bright.
Could you create a TV show with the old lady as the main character and watch an episode in your mind?
Yes. Not from start to finish though. It'll be clips. Like I can, like, even thinking about it right now, I can see the intro. And for this one in particular, it's just a very static intro of it's the front of a mansion house. and they'll have the front gate has like the symbol on it, and my brain can't even think of like the name of it right now. I just know that the flourish is the name highlights in pink neon over it with like the nice flourish with like, and then that's the name, and that's the intro of the show, and then the gate opens, and then you go enter the show, and then that goes into immediately the scene of grandma interacting with family members, and then having those interactions back and forth. But even then, my brain I'd have to put some effort into actually visualizing what those are. Like, it's very much kind of like if I were watching it on fast forward, or if like on a YouTube clip, my brain's just clicking through the different time codes of what that is, and then giving it 2 seconds, and then getting bored, and then hopping over to a next. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Well, the other part of it is that it's starting animated, but then I can also switch it up. Like, I start graphic, and then I can get more detailed. But yeah. And if I were to just think off the top of my head, like, what would this be? Like not grandma's, but maybe like Genevieve's, like, an old timey name, just being like Genevieve, Genevieve's place or whatever. And then that would be the place. And then you go in, and then Grandma Genevieve.
All right. One last question with the old woman.
Sure.
Can you make her appear 40 years younger?
Yes. In a flashback. It wouldn't, but I wouldn't be able to like do a full reversal, but I can visualize it. I can't say it would be like accurate, but I can visualize my brain taking the suggestion and then applying it, and not necessarily make it like a carbon copy. Like, it could still be amorphous. Like I said, still that's 7 to 8 range. But yeah, like I can get there. It's just getting it there. It gets a little weird and janky.
Tune in next week for part 2 of Discovering the Mind of Brett Kelley. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, and engage with us, and share it with your friends and family as we continue to explore this fascinating subject. For additional information about this episode or Shane's Brain, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Discovering Your Mind podcast. You are beautifully unique.